Oh, hi there, friends. Mandy here. Restorative Grief is all about creating easy access to healing no matter where or who you are. That's why I want you to remember that if you want grief support beyond a podcast, my 31-day guidebook is available to order on Amazon. Embracing our losses without losing ourselves is a reflective journey into the holistic needs of grievers and learning to support yourself, mind, heart, body, and spirit. Don't just wing it. You can lean into grief work with a guide. The link for the book and more are available in the show notes, and as always, you can reach out with questions. But for now, let's get on to this week's episode. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 180, titled You Can't Fix Everything, but You Can Show Up. If you're anything like me, the last few months have been wildly dysregulating. You could throw a dart every 10 minutes, and each time you'll hit another event that draws us away from our core expressions of who we are. When we are grieving an ongoing situation, it can be easy to lose sight of our core values, and that's the spot we want to return to when we begin looking for more regulating practices in the middle of chaos. So today, we're going to talk about how to recognize when we're out of alignment and move back toward a connection with ourselves that honors the heart of why we cared in the first place. The phrase, "the world is not mine to save," resonates deeply in a culture that often glorifies individual heroism and the relentless pursuit of solutions. It serves as a reminder that despite our best intentions, we cannot and should not carry the weight of the world's injustices and struggles on our shoulders. However, this mantra can be misunderstood. It does not absolve us of our responsibility to act on behalf of our communities or stand in solidarity with those in need. Rather, it encourages a shift from a mindset of saviorism to one of collective responsibility and connectedness. In a world that often feels broken and unjust, many of us are driven by a deep desire to fix what seems wrong. We find ourselves consuming endless books, signing up for every course, and chasing every solution, all in an attempt to regain a sense of certainty and control. It's a common response to grief and overwhelm, especially when faced with systemic injustices, societal turmoil, and our own personal struggles. But this need to grasp for answers and exert control can leave us feeling disconnected, exhausted, and no closer to the change we seek. So how do we move toward a healthier, more embodied approach to being effective in this world? Personally, my core values at this season of my life are curiosity, openness, authenticity, rest, and hope. Living from a place of alignment with my values means moving towards self and others with one or more of these values as the lens. That plays out beautifully in difficult conversations. As a lens, curiosity allows me to remain present, connected, and invested in a conversation, not for the sake of the outcome, but for the sake of the person and our relationship. Even when I am filled with grief as a result of the topic or the person's approach or any other factor, I can remain connected to myself and my personal ethos of honoring the humanity and dignity of another person. But what happens when I drop my lens of curiosity? Let's say I miss my inner cues of dysregulation, and instead of keeping curiosity at the forefront, I become frustrated and let my anger speak for itself. Out comes a version of me that is stuttering, flustered, and stuck in a binary thinking. The personhood of the other is no longer an important factor. Protecting my ego and being safe from harm is the primary goal. When we believe the world is ours to save, we are operating from a state of inflated ego and an unrealistic worldview. We are not isolated heroes of the story, able to educate and correct every harmful hot take that we hear. Instead, our healthiest approach is to apply a lens of wonder toward our own inner world, find connection back to ourself, and only then choose to move toward others. It may not fix what we feel is broken, but fixing also cannot be our goal. In fact, before we even begin that movement back toward ourselves, we have to acknowledge the roots of our desire to fix everything around us. This urge to fix stems from a place of grief and fear. When we are overwhelmed by the enormity of the world's problems, be they injustice, inequality, or even the disconnection we feel in our own lives, our instinct is often to gather more knowledge, take more action, and tighten our grip. However, this response is counterproductive. Instead of fostering change, it can leave us burnt out, anxious, and disconnected from the very communities we want to support. This is a black and white way of thinking, driven by our ego, to try and repair and protect our unrealistic view of the world. So when we begin this work, we have to shift from control into connection. Think back to your last emotionally charged interaction with someone about current events. Can you identify where the disconnection began? Now, recall the conversation before that. When we're honest, we can notice that a state of connection with ourselves and with others ebbs and flows. Connection is on a spectrum, and when we lose sight of that truth, we lean toward control. When we are stuck in a cycle of needing to control outcomes, we also lose sight of the power of connection. Can you see the cycle here? Our job as grief-literate people is to notice where we are in the cycle, and instead of continuing it, looking for a way off the beaten path before us. A healthier path away from that cycle is to recognize that we don't have to fix everything to make a difference. True change happens when we are deeply connected to the people and the communities around us, not when we try to take on every injustice alone. Connection is the antidote to control. Instead of focusing on what you can fix or how much information you can consume, shift your attention to how you can connect with others in meaningful ways. This might be through conversation, shared actions, or simply by offering support and presence to those who need it. The most powerful movements for change often start small, by building trust, fostering relationships, and creating spaces where people feel seen and heard. Next, we have to figure out how to release our savior complex. As we work toward a space where others feel seen and heard, remember, this space is here for you too. If you are hell-bent on helping others, you might miss your own well-being in the process. Many of us feel an unconscious responsibility to save the world or to be the person who can solve every problem. While this drive may come from a place of compassion and care, it's important to recognize that no one person carries the weight of everything. When we internalize the idea that we must be the ones to solve the issues, we set ourselves up for disappointment and exhaustion because, my friends, we are not the saviors. Believing so, even in small ways, is another way our ego reinforces our unrealistic worldview that prevents us from moving toward a more meaningful, integrated, and authentic self. Instead, focus on what is within your control. What small intentional actions can you take that align with your values and contribute to the well-being of those around you? By releasing the pressure to be a savior, you allow space for others to step up and contribute their unique gifts to the collective effort. It is in this space that we can begin to cultivate grounding practices. When we give ourselves permission to focus on the state of our inner world, we can move away from protecting our ego and the unrealistic worldview. It is in this space that we find a need to replace what formerly kept us grounded in our ego with a more fluid, supportive practice to reinforce a realistic awareness of our place in the world. Ego-driven grounding reinforces the false beliefs that we have to protect our own ideas against every enemy, instead of allowing us to become open and available to new information. And we know that when we're caught in the cycle of needing to know and do more, it's easy to become disconnected from our body and our own needs. A realistic awareness of our place in the world serves to release some of the pressure we put on ourselves. we are not the center of the universe, and that's great news. What kind of release could you experience in your own grief work if you allowed yourself to simply reconnect with that truth? Breaking the pattern of trying to rescue everyone is crucial. It helps us step away from the whataboutisms that we use to grasp for control when we feel powerless. To do so, we focus on cultivating grounding practices that help us reconnect with ourselves and the present moment. This can include mindfulness, breathwork, somatic exercises, or spending time in nature, anything that gets us out of our cyclical, critical way of thinking and into our body. Now, grounding practices might sound like a boring and familiar recommendation, but that's because the body can only be here in the present moment. Yes, we can carry embodied memories of the past, but until Doc Brown cracks time travel for real, or at least shares his secrets about it, we are all planted firmly in the here and now. Our brain has the ability to make sense of the here and now and understands the reality of safety in the here and now when we bring our attention to it. Grounding practices remind us that we do not have to live in a constant state of doing in order to create change. Presence and embodiment are just as important as action, and when you are grounded in your body and connected to your own needs, you move through the world with more clarity, presence, and sustainability, showing up in ways that actually matter. As we integrate our here and now grounding practices for connection, we also have to learn how to say no in a world of constant information and endless demands. Not every problem is yours to solve, and not every interaction requires your full attention. Setting healthy boundaries is essential to maintaining your well-being while still contributing meaningfully to your community. So ask yourself, where am I overextending? Where can I offer my gifts without draining myself? By establishing clear boundaries, you create space for your energy and efforts to have a greater impact rather than spreading yourself too thin across too many causes. This also allows you to recenter your efforts on causes that align with your core values. One of the main principles of activism is knowing what you stand for, and you cannot stand against everything. Effective activism requires clarity in purpose and focus. And if you try to stand against everything, you risk spreading yourself too thin, diluting your impact, and burning out. Activism and even grief work is most powerful when it is intentional and grounded in core values. That doesn't mean ignoring interconnected issues. It means prioritizing where you direct your energy. By knowing what you stand for, you can engage in meaningful, sustainable action rather than reacting to every injustice in a way that ultimately leaves you exhausted and ineffective. It's about depth over breadth, being rooted in a cause so that your work creates real change rather than just noise, and boundaries are the expression of our needs and our values in action. I love the work of Nedra Glover-Tawwab on healthy boundaries and the work it takes to reinforce said boundaries. So if you are unfamiliar with her, consider this your assignment to buy her book and get started. And I will include a link in the show notes. But this is where the work gets vulnerable. It can be really hard to execute the boundaries we want or notice that we've left our values behind because of fear. Fear of feeling powerless, out of control, or even too vulnerable creates disconnection from our core values and the outcomes we really want to see. But true connection and change only come when we are willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerability allows us to acknowledge our limits, to ask for help, and to trust that others can share the burden of making the world a better place. Does that sound familiar? Vulnerability is crucial for the sake of boundary work, of being grounded, learning to say no, and ultimately reintegrating our values in place of the harmful values we have unintentionally embodied through our ego. Vulnerability is practiced when we start to name the values our ego puts forth as primary. When we're driven by our ego, our core values can become distorted, often leading us to prioritize self-protection, control, or external validation over genuine connection and integrity. Letting go of the need to control every outcome and embracing our vulnerability can be transformative. It invites others into the process and allows for collective growth rather than individual burnout. By showing up authentically, imperfections and all, you create space for deeper connection and more sustainable change. And lastly, we need to learn to trust the impact we have. Ultimately, what we want to offer our true self is the chance to surface and trust the ripple effect. This is the healthiest and most sustainable path forward. Each of our small intentional actions embodying our values create little shifts toward or away from the desired outcomes. We know this to be true because in our own internal work, every action we take moves us closer to or further from the person we want to become. There is no standing still. You don't have to take on the world's problems single-handedly, nor do you have to handle every issue at once and for all. By focusing on your immediate community and the people around you, you can make a meaningful impact without feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of global issues. How might trusting the ripple effect of your life help you to embody your core values more closely today? When you lead from a place of connection, of groundedness, and of vulnerability, your actions inspire others to do the same. This ripple effect spreads outward, creating change on a much larger scale than any one person could accomplish alone. Trust that your presence, your values, and your small intentional actions matter, even if you cannot see the immediate results. Letting go of the need to fix everything doesn't mean giving up on creating change. I also understand that when we are grieving so much at once, the powerlessness gets loud and permeates into every corner of our lives. This is why we need grief literacy when the world feels like a dumpster fire. Grief literacy in this context means recognizing that you are part of the larger community and that your responsibility is to bear the weight together with others who share your values and your willingness to put in compassionate, caring effort. By shifting your focus from control to connection, setting healthy boundaries, and embracing vulnerability, you will engage with the world from a place of an embodied presence and continue working toward restoration for yourself and on behalf of others. Thank you for listening to episode 180 of Restorative Grief. Lasting change doesn't come from trying to do it all. It comes from showing up, connecting with ourselves and others, and trusting that our efforts, no matter how small, are enough. You don't need to consume every book or chase every solution to be effective. The real power lies in how you move within your community and how you allow yourself to become a part of a larger collective effort for change. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I want to thank you for your willingness to dig into the discomfort of growth. We need more people who are willing to say the hard thing with compassion over criticism, knowing the seeds they plant today will bear fruit for a future generation to feast upon. Be sure to check out the show notes for Nedra Glover Tawwab's book on boundary setting, as I think it is required reading for all humans in grief work. And in the show notes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon to support the show, as well as access the workbook and bonus podcast episodes. Share this episode on your social media too, because you know your connections are watching what you post, even if they're not engaging with it. You might just help someone out of the difficult place they find themselves stuck within. And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.